They said the basin was empty. No cars, no foot traffic, just the cold air and an odd metallic sky. But that night, the stars didn't just fall, they tinkled. Tiny, distant pinpricks hit the hollow like soft rain. My friend called out one name over and over into a pocket of light that swallowed sound. Then, silence.
I'm Samnang. This is where we trade comfort for curiosity. Find somewhere dark and quiet, put your headphones on, and listen like you're the one standing on the rim. Tonight's story is called The Basin Where Stars Fall.
The missing friend was named Eli. He was a teacher in a small town that sits like a bruise across the high desert. One gas station, a diner that stays open too late, and a library that smells of old paper and dust. Eli loved the sky the way some people love music. He kept a notebook of constellations, cigarette stubs at the ready, and a habit of naming small patches of dark as if they were people. On most nights, he'd drive out past the last telephone pole, past the sagging fence, until the town was a bright memory behind him. The air out there tastes like cold iron and sage. Wind moves in layers, soft on your face, then a sudden dry shove. You can hear your own blood. Eli liked it because when the sky was clear, he could pretend the world was only stars and him and a blanket on gravel.
The basin has a history, if you listen to the old ones. They called it a hollow where lights sometimes gather, where livestock avoid the low ground on certain nights, where compasses wobble like they can't find true north. People call that superstitious until something that shouldn't happen happens, and then they invent a name for the way the world bent.
The first search started because Eli didn't come home. His truck was at the old turnout. His notebook was open in the glove compartment. There were cigarette butts on the passenger seat and a thermos half full of cheap coffee. At the rim, we found a trail, not footprints as much as a path of cooled light, like someone had walked, leaving embers where their shoes touched the ground.
We found a bracelet, the kind Eli wore, silver, thin, lying on a ledge. It wasn't cold. It was warm, as if something had just held it. The coyotes that usually sang to the night kept their distance, their voices folding away the farther we walked into the basin. A raven circled once and then left. The town made jokes. He went star hunting. We laughed to keep from saying what we really feared.
At first, the rational answers stacked up like stones. Eli was stubborn. He'd gone off alone before. Maybe he found a new spot, a forgotten camp. Maybe the lights were a trick of the air, distant vehicles. Maybe the bracelet had simply fallen. But rationalizations are thin in places where the sky begins to behave like a living thing.
Then the pattern emerged. Not just Eli. 2 others who liked to camp alone. A pair of hunters who never returned their truck lights. Each disappearance followed a meteor shower, a night when the sky put on a show, and then, somewhere between the flashes, something small landed and stayed. Not big comets, little lights, the size of a coin, the color of a cold ember. People started saying the hollow kept the stars, as if the basin had hands.
Things started to behave wrong. Compasses spun like they had seen a puppet master. Radios, tuned to static, caught a thin, wavering sound, an undernote that wasn't music but suggested the idea of a tune you almost remember. Dogs refused to step onto the basin floor. The town's older folks remembered similar patterns generations back. stories washed with time until they sat in corners and didn't make noise. Memory became rumor, rumor became watchfulness.
One night the constellations shifted, not by hours or weather, by small, deliberate moves, like a hand rearranging pins on a board. Folks looked up and misread Orion for a while, then realized a bright star had slid and left a thin, aching absence in the map. A school kid pointed it out. "Where's my star?" People laughed, but didn't look at the basin the same way afterward.
I could have left it at that. We could have lit the town brighter, stayed inside. But grief and guilt are heavy things. The one who couldn't forget was a friend of Eli's, Noah, a part-time mechanic, full-time stubborn. He decided to wait the predicted night, to camp where the stars had last fallen, with a recorder, with rope, with things meant to hold the world together. He invited me. We drove the dirt road until the lights behind us turned into two pale teeth in the windshield. We set a small fire because it felt right to have something ordinary while the sky did strange things. At midnight, a line of tiny ember light crawled along the ground, no bigger than a thumbnail, each flicker like a hesitant insect. The path led down into the hollow. Noah said, "That's them." His voice was steady and small. Noah followed the lights. I stayed with the recorder and the fire. When he didn't come back, the fire felt ridiculous, an island of normal. I followed his footprints, then the embers, then a hush that seemed to be the breath of the basin itself. The further down we went, the less color everything had. The desert palette drained to bone and pewter. My flashlight seemed to make things worse, like white paint on a photograph of nothing.
At the center of the basin, the sky hung low. The stars above were patchy, as if someone had plucked a handful and held them over a palm. Where Noah had stepped, there was a circle of silence. I found something else, a mason jar tied to a juniper limb with fishing line. Inside it were tiny, cooled embers, like the lights themselves, arranged as if someone had attempted to save a handful of night. One ember lifted from the jar and climbed up, not like smoke, but like memory returning home.
I have a recording from that night. It is a thin thing, wind, and a voice that becomes less human the longer you listen. The last clear line is Noah saying, "It's hungry for the bright ones." After that, the tape hums. Later, in town, people heard it and argued over what they were hearing. Some swear the tape captured a chorus of distant metallic kinkles, like coins dropped in water. Others said it was just the wind making the mic vibrate. The thing that matters is what the recorder didn't capture. Noah's footsteps leaving the rim. When I came back, something in me had changed. I remember the way light felt, like a blade. I remember the small ember that floated up from that jar and went on its way. I remember a child in town months later pointing at the sky and asking where a star had gone. We looked up. The map of night had a hole, a small absence, and no astronomer could account for it. Some nights, the town sleeps as if nothing happened. People go about their lives. Others watch the horizon for the faintest sign of ember light. There is a mason jar now in the diner display case, returned, they say, by an anonymous hand. Inside is a single cooled ember, dull and impossible to light. The town treats it like a relic, a curiosity, a warning. Kids dare each other to touch it. No one does. And the final image I carry is small and precise. A child pointing and whispering, "The sky is missing one." A single thin ember, freed from a jar tied to a juniper, lifts and goes up, like a thought returning to a head.
The basin keeps what it takes, and sometimes what it takes is a little piece of the night's map.
If you're still here, the story followed you to the end. Take a breath. Look up if you can. I'm Samnang. If this episode stayed with you, share it with someone who listens in the dark. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, check the corners. Keep your eyes open, and your lights maybe not too bright.